Hi guys, we are starting again because of the network issue. This should work out hopefully. Hi, I think it's working now.
Don't that yet, Sid.
No? Yeah. So I think we'll have to make do with this. Hello? Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes,
Finally, yes. We are live. People are still
I
joining, so let's
I
start.
think I think the
Yeah, yeah.
first question I think the first question people will have is that what can you do to assuage the internet gods to not them not let them be unkind when you're having a live and keep on switching you off and throwing you off like this? To which we have no answer.
We will
Yeah,
exactly. We will have to stop promoting lives now. We will have to just do them.
yeah,
Just wing them.
absolutely. That's the
So
best way.
let's start. Let's start by introducing you. And I was talking to I was talking to Prachand Tripathi, and while I was not expecting your name, and you have a penchant for prose, but let's talk about excess baggage, and we'll also have a discussion about runaway groom and love bites for the wedding food, and also let's listen to an unfinished melody. If that's not the hint enough, these are the books by Richa Mukherjee, who's here with us for the Instagram live session. Richa is a poet, ex-journalist, and an old hand in the advertising industry, all of which she bade farewell in order to write books about imaginary people. Her first book, A Penchant for Prose, was a collection of poems, while her first novel, I Didn't Expect to Be Expecting, is a light-hearted take on accidental pregnancy, and Kanpur Khufia Private Limited, a humorous thriller, and she has also written numerous e-singles and audiobooks. Her latest book, Excess Baggage, is an ode to family and what happens when a mother decides to join her daughter's solo trip across Europe. Richa has also been a TOI Write India winner, a blogger, and a travel writer. While when not traveling or singing in the bathroom, she spends time in Mumbai juggling life, writing, and chasing after her alarmingly nimble-footed daughter. Welcome, Richa, to the live session, and
Thank you.
thank you for this.
No, thank you again, Sid. I believe we have spoken on quite a few occasions, and I think the first one was when I think Kanpur Khufia brought us together. I still
Yes,
remember your
yes.
review is pretty much the first one I see on any of my books. And I honestly want to take a sidestep and first congratulate you on the reviews you write because I honestly think it's an art, you know. It's all right to be consumed by a book and love it so much that you are rendered inarticulate. You know, you don't know what to say, but to be constructive, to give honest feedback, and also be entertaining while you're doing the reviews is an art. And I really appreciate. I've seen your journey. I've seen you, all the events you used to go to, and you started posting. And I've seen all your other reviews. So congratulations. I think you've come a long way, and I
Thank you.
really
Thank
enjoy your reviews.
that means a lot. Coming from you, that means a lot. And I am actually happy, that we agreed to do this again. Since the first time that we did the live, the Instagram save feature wasn't there, so our
Hmm.
conversation could not be saved.
Yes.
But so twice is the charm. And let's talk about your writing process. Let's begin with that. So, how does this entire writing process work for you? Now you have three books, e-singles, and different books. So how does the
Hmm.
process actually go about?
Um, Honestly, I'd like to intellectualize about it, Sid, but a lot of the decisions that writers take, whether they're picking their themes or, whether it is that, they're deciding their next projects or what to take on, I think a lot of those decisions are impulsive decisions and they happen very organically because we tend to absorb even as human beings, I'm not just talking about anybody who's writing or creative pursuits, you tend to absorb everything. You're sensitive to context, conversations, environment. So as long as you keep your ears and eyes open and you're like a sponge and you're absorbing everything in your environment, those ideas come. In fact, it's a problem of plenty because there are too many ideas that come to you. They don't tell you that, listen, I want to move me in the direction of an e-single or move me in the direction of a book or move me in the direction of a poem. But, that is where you're in, once you start writing, which is why I keep talking about the fact that forget about disciplines and routines and all of that. Everybody finds their own way to it. What you need to do is you need to write. You need to write enough
Right.
to know that, how to sift and filter those ideas, to know the tonality of your writing, and to know that to even discover what you enjoy writing. That's what keeps you coming back. And as far as routines are concerned, I think we discussed this even the last time we spoke, said that I started writing at a very tumultuous time in my life when I was, dealing with diapers and bawling babies. So I've always written it in a very frenetic environment. Not that I look for it or I seek it. It's just the way, life is. And I have always told myself that I will come back to the laptop. I would love to. I'm an old school person and I love writing, on paper and pen, but unfortunately that's not convenient in these times. So I write as much as I can write. I write whenever I can write. I don't try to coerce myself until unless I have deadlines. So I'm sounding very wise, but I have a deadline as we speak because I need to really finish my next draft. But having said that, I don't coerce myself beyond a point because that is not conducive to productivity or enjoyment. You lose your flow as you go if you're constantly pushing
Right.
yourself. So while I would love to give a concerted amount of time every day, that is not possible. I like to keep on saying this because life has its way with me every day and there's always something happening. So I try to dedicate possibly an hour or two on good, maybe 2 or 3 hours on a really, really good day. Otherwise, I try and write every day, whether it's, an article that I'm writing because I write for a couple of platforms, whether I'm blogging. I really, really, this year I've told myself I don't make resolutions because I know that safely means those, those targets are never going to get achieved. But I really want to return to my blog and I'm going to write a little more. I want to write a little more poetry. So I'm trying to get done with the next book now. And in that interim period between books is when I'm going to write other things. So that's as simple as my routine is, Sid. I try and write as often as I can, whenever I can. And there were times I used to take off to the typical author cliche in terms of, seeking quiet places in cafe corners. But I do that and I enjoy that. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that once the pandemic is behind us. But otherwise, I can pretty much write anywhere. And yeah, I don't push myself too hard.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective, writing something every day so that, it culminates into something, that comes out as a complete story.
Sure.
Uh, your bio and also mentioned, and as you also mentioned, that you don many hats. You are an author, you are a blogger, you are a poet, and a traveler. So, which one do you think is more daunting and challenges you more?
Sorry, Sid, I couldn't hear you properly. Sorry.
Okay. So, I was asking that you don many hats, an author, a poet, a blogger, and a traveler. So, which one do you think is more daunting and challenging for you?
Again, I most of my responses will come across as very simplistic and naive, but honestly, when you're writing, it is a format of expression. It is a form of expression, and irrespective of what format it pulls through. So, for example, um, I think poetry is a very undistilled, organic, raw means of expression. You don't cogitate too much. It's just about an immediate expression. So for me, poetry has always been that, and I tend to write a lot of serious poetry as a result of that, because just because I'm writing humor doesn't mean I can't think of other things. I don't observe other things that need a little more that need other means of expression. So I think poetry is easier that way because I think it's second skin for me. uh, Blogging, again, I think is I don't know. It gives me a certain sense of freedom where I don't have to where I can be reactive in my opinion as well. A lot of the times when I blog or when I'm writing articles, it's about, issues or things that I have, that have environmentally just occurred to me, where I can, without sifting through an end point and a beginning and a middle and an end and thinking about a process and a structure, I can just immediately express myself. And so I think I enjoy blogging and writing articles as well. But if you were asking me about a favorite, I don't think anything is daunting because all of them are helping me express in a certain way. But if you're asking me
Okay.
which scares me yet exhilarates me the most is my books. And when I'm writing long format, because there's a certain insanity and an extreme amount of joy that is infused into the process, where you're sitting in your own shoes, trying to be in several other shoes. You're conjuring characters and stories. You are the only one who's responsible for whatever happens in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And through
Right.
your words, you're trying to connect with a whole bunch of readers that you've never met and you never possibly will. So I think there's
Right.
a great sense of restriction, yes, freedom. So there's a lot of contradictions here, but that's what makes it so, gives me such intense pleasure while writing it. And, that is why I'm consumed by it when I'm doing it. And that's why I block out all the noise around me. So it's daunting, but it's exhilarating at the same time, the long format.
Right. So, from your first book, that was a collection of poems, to Excess Baggage, if you had to describe your journey as a writer, how would you do it?
I would call myself a wanderer. I've always called myself a nomad in terms of, I think it stems from the fact that I was always moving around as a child. So, which is why my father was in the government service, and I was constantly reading, constantly fighting with my sisters, three of them, that, we were always had opinions to exchange with each other as we traveled across India. And I think somewhere the writer in me was marinating. I keep saying that because your experiences in life, all the pit stops that you make along the way, the people within your family, the people you meet outside, all the people I had to befriend in the 6 schools that I changed, all the job roles that I have been I've been a journalist, I've been in advertising, and uh, you know, uh, the MBA, being in an institute, staying away from home. I think all of them give you some contribute to your perspective and your lens on the world that you train on the world. And I honestly think that because I have enjoyed every pit stop, that has contributed in, I think one of the reasons I write humorously is because so much of upheaval and change around me, I have viewed with a parallel soundtrack happening in my head, where
Okay.
it makes all the change, it's a managing technique. When there's so much changing
Okay.
and when you have no control, then all the idiosyncrasies of yourself and the world around you, and there's so much cynicism around you, everything is changing, you're meeting new people, you want to project yourself in a certain light. So all of that somehow made me just think back and observe people a little more. So the experiences, the observation, I think all of that marinated and continued to marinate the writer within me. Journalism, I was exposed to a whole variety, from criminals to soft business stories. In advertising, I was doing consumer research. I was trying to be this this wedged cabbage between clients on one end and creative people on the other end, who didn't want to write the scripts that we wanted them to. So it was a lot of role playing in all the various
Okay.
capacities of, so patience, role playing, putting yourself in other people's shoes, empathy. All of these factors contribute towards your worldview and help you understand people and write about them better. So I think it's a
Oh,
journey where I don't even view it as a journey. I just think that as I was meant to be here, as cliched as it sounds, and I enjoyed every step, every point in the journey where I got off, experienced it to the fullest, and that's how I got here.
yeah, that's an interesting perspective, different life experiences culminating into the writer in you.
Absolutely.
Uh, so, I watched the live you did with Ravinder when you launched Access Package, and there was an interesting anecdote about the Write India event. Would you like to tell us a bit about it?
So I don't know if I should talk about reminisce about it with a lot of joy and pride, because I often refer to it as the worst elevator pitch anybody could have ever made. Because I came in the top 10 and I went for this the felicitation ceremony. And at that point in time, I had finished writing. I didn't expect to be expecting, and but I did not have any hopes of being published, like many of us. And but when I saw this opportunity and I saw Ravinder was standing in the room and I knew that he had a publishing house, I cringed and I hemmed and I hawed and I went up to him and I just told him that, listen, I have something I've written. Can I just show it? So I think by my gestures more than my words, he understood that, I had a, I had a book that I wanted him to look through. So he said, why don't you just follow the guidelines and send it to me? And it was almost like, I threw the ingredient in the Havan Kund and I said, okay, I'm not hearing back from this Havan Kund for sure. And I just left it. But then in about 2.5 months, he called and first he gave me a heart attack where he said, you write well, but I've called you for feedback. I don't think you make it this year, but keep writing. And I was like, really? I don't want the feedback right now. I'm upset. But then he was joking, obviously. And then he told me that, I'd love to publish you. And, HarperCollins wants to come on board. And I mean, of course, I was screaming for the longest time. And yeah, everything's changed since then. So I'm really, I'm so glad that I have him as a friend, a publisher, a mentor, everything. And yeah, he's pretty much a part of my journey even now.
Yeah, in fact, all of your books have him as your publisher. So that's something that's very interesting, the way your books have come out in collaboration with him. And I remember you telling that he does this with every book, that he calls you up and says the book is not working out and something like that.
Or he behaves like a stern schoolmaster, where if I'm pitching an idea to him, then he'll have this inscrutable expression, and I'm wondering whether it's nice, whether it's bad. You never get any immediate feedback, and then it's almost like he's swishing some wine around his mouth, and he's like, okay, that's interesting, not bad. So it's like, it gives you ulcers, and till the point that he listens and gives some kind of feedback. So that's part of his process, I think.
So, coming to your latest book, Excess Baggage, what inspired you to write about the Punjabis? And I mean the surname and not the Punjabi people. That's
Yeah,
that's one of yeah,
that's caused a lot of confusion. Interesting, happy confusion, I hope. So
yes.
I remember during one of my recent launches that I was asked about where the initial stirrings of this book was. And in fact, again, I have the same very diary where this is one of my traveling diaries. If I turn it around, I'm sitting in my desk. I have about 18 of them right here. So this is my traveling diary where I note down my observations and thoughts and ideas when I'm moving around. I don't like doing it on my phone. So we were on our way to Spain, and we bumped into a friend of ours who we hadn't met for a while. And she happened to sit and chat with us and tell us about the divorce that she was going through. And it's not that it was a new topic. I've had very close friends and family who went through the same experience. But somehow the way she was describing, the quandary, it was almost like it wasn't a painful yet, possible, a stage in life which she could move on from. It just seemed like a whole life had come to a standstill. And the fact that she wasn't getting
Okay.
enough support and she was constantly being questioned, it's almost like it becomes your second skin instead of just being a painful process which you move on from, and then you take on the reins of the rest of your life. So somehow that stayed with me. And within a couple of hours, I think by the time we were getting off at our next stop, I had the initial stirrings of the idea, where I was just started thinking about these characters. And I didn't expressly set out to talk about divorce. But once I was in the shoes of Anfiksha Punjabi and Smita Punjabi, and I naturally started thinking about what their real world would be around them. I borrowed from their ecosystem, which was very naturally,
Okay.
rife, full of topics such as, the labels that, women, when they choose to live their lives differently, suddenly invite labels, right? So I'm not talking about
Right.
vicious
Right.
labels. It's just about labels of comfort. I call them labels of comfort because, it's like she's a certain age, she should act a certain way. Twice divorced, there must be something wrong with her. They're traveling the world alone. What are they thinking? So there was a lot of these residual feelings, and there were these these issues that had always been somehow floating about in my head. And once I started writing about these characters, those layers naturally formed. There were other stronger
Oh,
layers like the partition, which I've written about, but I think that also naturally came from the fact that there's all kinds of baggage. There's baggage that we accumulate on our
right,
own, and then there's baggage which we have no control over, and it happens as a consequence of us being a part of events we can't control. So, even that has an impact on us. So I think these layers developed as and when I started writing the story. So for me, even in terms of a process, I think the story comes to me like a log line in my head, which in screenwriting
okay,
terms is just a summation, a one line summation of your story. And once I have that in my head, I immediately jump to the characters. There is obviously you have to take a lot of care in terms of, I mean, we can talk about structure and plotting. Of course, that's important. But for me, somehow the character starts taking shape first because they are the pillars on which the storyline and everything else,
right.
rest. So once that's how the Punjabis came around, and and after that, it was easier to make those layers.
Right. Uh, One question that's been, that I all wanted to ask you was why did you name the dogs Mutton and Bhindi?
That's very simple. I munch and I snack a lot while eating. So I, I
Okay,
possibly was in that state of mind where mutton's my favorite meat, I think, and bhindi is one of my favorite vegetables. And again, it must have been very contextual. My daughter loves bhindi. Bhindi must have been made, so somehow I just thought it's amusing to always, in advertising, we were taught that uh, how do you break clutter is by creating memorable characters, and obviously even titles and brands, there has to be something interesting and memorable. So
right,
so for example, in Kanpur Khufia Private Limited, Prachand Tripathi, I actually thought a little more about the name because it was larger than life in many ways because he was this small town guy with big dreams. So somehow I wanted his name to embody this ambition. So hence, Prachand
right.
Tripathi. So at least there was
Prachan.
some thought
Yeah.
there, yeah. But as far as excess baggage is concerned, I think again it was a very impulsive process where Smita Punjabi was just a regular Smita auntie. Anviksha is a name that I've always loved. Talli Masi is always one of those Masis you'll always find, those one uncle or auntie who's always inebriated and dancing at weddings and saying embarrassing things about you. Everybody has a Talli Masi at their homes. So it just
Right.
naturally came from borrowing from your realities. So, and yeah, I love giving funny names. So that's, I guess, my writing quirk.
Yeah, because I remember this was one thing that stuck with me, the names, especially Smita and Anviksha and the all the people that you meet have very memorable names. They're not like you will forget the character, but you might not forget the name. So that was an interesting thing that that's been there in your books across. In fact, in all the books, it's there.
That's actually, it's funny you say that because that's one of the first feedback I got when this whole conversation about screen adaptation started. That was the first feedback I got for KKPL as well as excess baggage. But I was speaking to this wonderful gentleman, Alkopol Chaudhary, who handles it at Harper, and he said, "What is with your names?" Like he just started laughing. He said, these are very memorable names and they're quirky, and I think they're sticky. They stay in the head. So yeah, I'm glad. I hope I don't lose my streak.
No, no. In fact, this made me notice that a lot of people around me who have dogs, their names are based on food items. So I know one person who has a dog named Idli. One person has a dog named Muffin. So yeah. So this is something actually that came as a realization later.
So
But we
I had a
have done
friend.
this.
I had a friend whose two dogs were named Headache and Disprin. Beat that.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
that's
That's
definitely
taking
interesting.
ingenuity to another level altogether.
Exactly. And why did they name it headache and discipline? That's another
I have no
topic
idea.
of
They just
discussion.
said they bark a lot. We love them, but it's like one used to challenge the other, and they were always at loggerheads with each other. So I don't know. Somehow, maybe from there, that's where it came.
So, the title of the book, Excess Baggage, was that the title all along, or was did it come much later?
Much later. In fact, just before
Okay,
publication, because again, if I take you through the journey, I didn't expect to be expecting. It was my first book. I was being very ambitious. I was trying to be all quippy and smart, with my long labored title. that, I wanted it to be a take on Dr. Spock's famous book, which
Right.
every pregnant person reads, right? Every pregnant woman reads, what to expect when you're expecting. And my publishers said that, it's a little long and labored. It causes problems at retail and, for recall and all of that. But I insisted, and poor things, they indulged me. So I have no massive regrets, but yes, it causes a lot of issues when you have such long labored titles. Kanpur Khufia Private Limited, I think, just came to me somehow. There were these, Mandir ka bells ringing in my head. And even before I started writing about the characters, it was very clear in my head. So the title came to me first, interestingly. And
Okay.
it's almost like every book teaches me something new about my own thought process. So there were two, options there. And then for Excess Baggage, I had no clue till the time it was going to publication. And I was really anxious. And we were doing, we were having this brainstorm. And because my conundrum was that I wanted something that would encapsulate the relationship, the quandary, or of these choices in life,
Right.
and this coming of age kind of story, and also a trip. So I didn't know what to give more weightage to. So it was that classic, brand problem where you don't know what to put forth first, which concept to
Right.
put forth first. So then, thankfully, I think we had an internal chat and lots of brainstorms, and it in fact came from them. And I was so happy because just before that, I had come up with a title, but then unfortunately, it was taken up by a very similar sounding title by another book which was in the pipeline. So again, it was causing a lot of confusion. So somehow this took a long way, a long time to find itself, but I'm glad because I think it encompasses and summarizes everything that I was trying to convey. And all aspects and layers of the story somehow get reflected in this title beautifully. So I'm very glad.
Exactly. Yeah, Excess Baggage actually talks about, it talks about traveling, it talks about Anviksha, it talks about Smita as well. So all of them actually relate to the title. So that actually came around very well from the title. And your titles have actually started reducing with every book. So uh, I think the next one will be a single word then, I guess.
No, so the next one can't be because I can tell you that the next one is the second installment of Kanpur Khufia. So
Okay.
fortunately or unfortunately, it won't be. It'll actually be longer
Okay.
because there'll be a variant under it, some chronicle or something,
Okay.
but it'll be KKPL. So yeah, another long one you'll have to endure. But maybe after that, oh yes, you're being prophetic right now. And I'll tell you this
Okay.
maybe a year and a half later because I already have the
Okay.
title of my next book and I swear it's one word. So you've just been very prescient, Siddhant, and we'll refer back to this conversation.
Definitely. I am holding you to that now. Uh, so, Excess Package has been optioned for screen even before it was released. How was that feeling, when you got that call?
They're usually emails first,
Okay.
to tell you that that it's happening, that there is a possibility that you can start dreaming. But it's a long journey. It's almost as arduous a journey as writing the book. So what I try to do to stay true to myself and keep myself rooted is that I have done this book. I have the intense privilege of getting the story out to people and having them read what I've conjured in my head. Beyond that, if it goes to a larger screen, I will absolutely be ecstatic, but I will let it take its time because it really does. So what I do is I just hold on to that happy feeling. Thankfully, I am kept out of the process. Otherwise, I'll be this irritating little bunny, jumping up and down and asking, "Is it done? Is it done? Are we there? Are we there?" So I don't think they want that. So I think it's good for them and me that I'm out of the process. And then I will tell you that when those calls finally do happen, it's the kind of giddy happiness that you possibly have never dreamed of, and then it's potent enough to fuel you forth for possibly the next 10 books. It's that kind of giddy happiness where starting in your own head, when it finds its way to a larger screen and several hundred people and beyond and gathers a life force of its own, it's indescribable.
So, since you have an advertising background, if you had to pick a USP for Excess Package, what would be it?
Sorry, Sid?
If you Since you are from an advertising background, If you had to choose an USP for excess baggage, what would be that USP?
Mm, I think it's about empathy. I love to roll the whole offering in one line, which is about it's a story about hope and second chances, coated in wanderlust and laughter. And the whole crux of all the emotions and the myriad relationships and all the layers and the baggage is that it helps you stand in the shoes of these the simplistic two people who are not intentionally at loggerheads. And nowhere in the book, there's one place where I've actually mentioned that Anviksha is walking around with the mutton with bhindi in London, and she's wondering to herself that you've heard of cantankerous mummies and nannies and chachis and all of that, but a
Yes,
mother daughter, it's like this deified institution, of relationships, which is very, it's never maligned because it's supposed to be something that will I don't know, it's supposed to be the purest form of love, right? A mother daughter relationship. So that never changes. But somehow, because of a lot of unfortunate events in their past, because of there are corners and crevices in our hearts where we store all these undigested feelings and we never articulate them,
right,
and somehow or the other they find their way into our realities, and then destroy the relationships that we do have around ourselves. So if she really wanted to be snarky and she really wanted to be mean to her mom, she could have just said, don't come along with me. And the mom had enough
right,
ways of hurting her daughter as well, but it's not intentional. And that, I think, is reflective of this whole process where it's a whole bunch of uh, people who live flawed lives, who are redefining what is normal. And I wanted people to understand that to what it feels to stand in shoes which are very much their own. These are characters you
right.
see in your daily lives, these are people you can identify with. So I think empathy is a central empathy and relatability. Of course, every story and any work of fiction aspires to do that, but I think there's genuinely this I don't know, empathy and relatability with these characters and the baggage that they've accumulated, like I said, as a consequence of their own actions and sometimes because of what has happened to them. And that
What
becomes
has
a
happened to them?
central, it's almost like a central protagonist on their own. And it's a central theme running through all the characters, who are
Right.
redefining their normal in their own way. And there's no perfection there. So I had hoped that people would identify with that, that there's nothing that's picture perfect. There's nothing that can be defined as normal. It's you who are redefining these on a daily basis as you go.
Right. So we have a question from Maharsha before we go ahead. Does your writing come mostly from gut or is it more process driven? I think it's similar to what we had in the initial part, but would you like to take that again?
Thanks for joining in Maharsh. Maharsh has written a fantastic book called Zoravar, which is a trilogy.
Zoravar,
It's a
yes.
three-part series, yes. So I have ordered my book and I'm eagerly waiting to read it. And thank you for your question, Maharsh. I I think it comes mostly from the gut. That is where the origin of the idea is. But there's this great debate in the writing industry: are you a plotter or are you a pantser? You know, so I don't think this. I could have started off saying I started my first book saying, oh, I'm an intuitive writer and I can, once I have that idea in my gut and I can quickly turn it to, put it onto paper without any kind of process. And with every book, I've realized the folly of that, that erroneous assumption. Because no matter what genre you're writing in, and I think Maharsh will agree, and whoever's joined us, that any kind of required, writing requires a structure. You might not read reams and reams of
Right,
literature and books on it, and you don't have to read sit through 50 master classes, but you need to know that a structure will hold you to your story and won't let you meander. There are people who detail out the processes, like their notes look like the back end green room of CSI Miami, with 15,000 of these chits, and there are these cards, and there's lots of processes that my friends tell me about, and I think it works. It works for a lot of people. But for me, as long as I have a structure in place where I have divided the book in sections and I understand what is happening in each section, sometimes I get really brave and I break it down chapter wise. But most of the times, once I have an idea about broadly what each section is doing, that is when I let my gut and my intuition take over and write. Because I don't think I like detailing out too much of what I'm writing, because that takes the fun out of it. And that allows me to be clumsy as well. So if I'm just writing and I hate it, then I can always come back and say, oh, this didn't make sense. I can just redo it. So it's partly this and that.
Yeah. Uh, so, th this leads to my next question. That writing excess baggage, how was it different from writing KKPL and I didn't expect to be expected?
I think I think intentionally or unintentionally, I'm always throwing challenges at myself when I'm writing. Either I am writing in a new genre, or I'm representing a new community, or I am, dealing with a whole host of, new issues. So as far as excess baggage was concerned, I think I was very scared. The idea, the whole writing part was very entertaining for me as well, because especially writing Smita Punjabi. But at the end of it, I had to caution myself because I was representing an entire community. I was representing, I was portraying parts of the point of views on the partition. I was talking about divorce. I was talking about a lot of sensitive issues, and how older women are supposed to
Right,
behave. So neither did I want to typify the community, and I wanted to sound authentic. So
right,
humor can take liberties, but it can also offend if you're not cautious about it. So, which is why I think this is one of those books where I finished writing it and I enjoyed the process thoroughly. But at the end of it, I went through more drafts than I can even care to count, because I was trying to tick all the boxes for these criteria. And this took me a while,
okay,
so I think I was trying to be thorough. And people who think that any kind of genre does not require research, I take great umbrage, because it doesn't matter what you're writing: thrillers, contemporary fiction, everyday stories. And there are some genres, of course, which demand it more. But I think research is the sinew and muscle on which the entire which helps you flex whatever the bare bones of the story is. So if you don't have your research, like for
right,
this book, I read, it isn't just anecdotal evidence which helps, right? It's not just about having one or two conversations in, okay,
right,
I've grown up with Sindhis, chalo, let's go write a book about it. So I actually went and read about 3 books about the partition, which are, these accounts of people who have had parents, because I wanted to understand an older person's perspective and a younger person's perspective, and how the community behaves, the general outlook. I mean, there are a lot of emotions and actions which are universal, but then when you're writing, those are
right,
the nuances and textures that make it different and make you understand and relate. So I've had a lot of
exactly,
Gujarati girls and boys writing and saying that, oh, my favorite food was there, and this is exactly how my mother would behave, and that's a delight. To just see that it's connecting and people have understood, and that research doesn't mean that, oh, I've read this, it must appear. It's what you absorb and you
right.
understand, and that is what comes out on paper. So
Yeah, that's actually important, Otherwise, connecting to the characters becomes difficult. But once you find that relatable streak, then you are with them throughout the story. So that's something I've seen in fact, KKPL as well. Because when we talk about the Tripathis and the inherent flavor of the city that's there inside the characters, so that's something very interesting. When you talk about humor, you write humor, and there's an inherent touch of sarcasm in the story as well. So, do you actually write them as the story progresses, or does that get added in the end, or maybe once you have finished writing a chapter, you go back and add those bits and pieces of humor and sarcasm?
like I said, I was referring earlier to this humorous lens I have on the world, right? Which doesn't mean that I am laughing at the world. I think my definition of it is, I'll talk about something very briefly. There's this, I don't think the pronunciation is right. It's called Schadenfreude, which is a German concept. It talks about the superiority of humor. It's a superiority theory, which essentially means that humor is written sitting on a pedestal, and you can be disparaging and making poke fun at the irregularities of life, and poke fun at people. So I firmly actually believe that it doesn't need to come from a disparaging place. There are certain kinds of humor which feed on that in an interesting way. So you'll see a lot of, even in my interviews, I've disparaged, I mean, I'm always using my own family as fodder. It tends to happen, and I vilify them all the time. So that tends to happen in late night shows and comedy and stand up and the YouTubers who are making their millions to the bank. So it does happen, but my humor, I'd like to call it, uh, I don't know, it's more of a everyday humor. It's a comedy of
Okay.
manner. It's a comedy of situation, which is just comes from pure observation. And I am absolutely not in their league, but I think I grew up reading P.G. Woodhouse and Irma Bombeck and Howard Jacobson. And these are the kind of people, and, even if you look across genres, for example, Ruth Rendell, who used to write mysteries, and even Agatha Christie. So, the way they used to observe, people around them, the drama that unfolds on a day-to-day basis, the idiosyncrasies, reactions of people. So for me, it was all a lot of situational and observational humor. So I think while I'm writing it, it's because I'm thinking of those characters in that situation that it naturally flows. And yes, later when I'm doing drafts is when again I'm sifting and seeing, does this seem too forced? Does this seem too contrived? Is it not natural enough? So then I do my checks and balances later. But I think
Okay.
that is the way I gravitate towards in terms of writing as I'm writing. So it flows pretty organically.
Okay. So, you have published three novels, three singles, and one poetry collection. How has been your experience with the publishing and the book marketing overall?
Um, One of the biggest lessons I learned, I think, was that uh, the author needs to work as hard as the publishers. And I learned it very early on. I've had immense support from my publishers, but I have just realized that, firstly, you have to stop being ashamed of talking about your book and marketing your own book, because somehow when it is done through a traditional publishing platform, all authors will stand with a big Cheshire, cat grin on their faces and say, we're proud to be published. But as soon as it comes in an individual domain, the first thing you do is cringe. And I have cringed so hard and for so long, and I have finally learned my lesson that, we're all reluctant people, and I can sell shampoos and, bottles and paints and Coca-Cola. But when it comes to selling something creative that you have, put your sweat and blood in, it's not easy, right? Interjecting yourself and constantly talking, shoving your book down people's throats. So I think there's a dignified manner in which you can do it, but it is essential.
Okay.
So you cannot,
Okay.
publishers have hundreds and hundreds of titles coming out every single month. The state of the industry, much like across industries, is in, dire straits at the moment, and it's just about picking up after the pandemic. Before or after, I think there's always this battle of titles happening. There's a whole distribution
Right.
issue. There's a back end. There's so many issues, invisible issues, that you just think that you can write a book and say, hand it over to you, I'm done. But that's not the way it works. And that is where I appreciate community. So once you've understood that it is, once you've taken ownership of the process, is when you'll do it better. So if you've stopped fighting it and you've accepted you need to do it, that is where I am really appreciative of author communities online. There are so many of them on Facebook. There are reading communities. There are book clubs. And a big shout out to bookstagrammers as well, because writing is an isolating profession. And especially because of the pandemic, at least we used to go out and do our book, signings and do our
Right.
events and all of that. And nowadays, you release a book, and I'm very appreciative that I at least got an opportunity to do it in such a bad year. But you're just sitting and twiddling your thumbs and waiting. So some readers aren't that savvy, or, they might not be able to, they're reluctant to reach out to you. But, you have, smart, enthusiastic, passionate readers who are articulate in terms of what they like, what they don't like, and they put your books in these wonderful frames and make it look like art. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that, we have the communities like these, and like you guys do. And, you don't hold back on your reviews as well. And, it's good to see some kind of feedback coming in as opposed to just sitting and waiting, right? So there's a lot of
Right.
avenues of interaction. I'm part of blogging communities. I'm part of poetry communities. And what is important, Siddhant, I think, is consistency. You cannot be part of all these groups and communities and just show up when your,
Right.
book is coming out and say, hello, buy my book. It doesn't work like that. It has to be genuine
Right.
engagement. It's about authors supporting authors. It's about writers supporting writers. It's about all these communities supporting each other because we're all part of the same ecosystem, and that's how it works. So I think publishers are doing a great job. Authors need to consistently do that job through the year and make it easier for the publishers because there's a lot of varied interests across platforms. So we need to work as hard. And there are enough avenues. There are certain restrictions when it comes to traditional publishing platforms. So sometimes, when people ask me what is better, traditional or self-publishing, I keep saying there are pros and cons to both. So, for example, if you've got your own book, if you come across an opportunity where there is some kind of a mela happening in a tier 3 cities where usual penetration is not possible for those kind of readers, and you want to
Right.
send a bunch of books, so knee-jerk decisions and impulsive decisions are not possible because there's a whole pipeline that you need to go through because your books are published elsewhere and you
Right.
don't have those decisions. But I guess there are enough other avenues as well, because when you go to LitFest, you get your books displayed over there, and then you can interact with people. So I think it's all about evolving and adapting as you go, and thinking of more and more opportunities. So every time marketing ideas are being brainstormed whenever a book comes out, it's not just the publishers. I mean, what I try and do is I also try and list out all the possible ideas I can and send a presentation. They might laugh at half of it, but at least I know
Right.
I've done my due diligence, and I feel like I'm back in my advertising days, presenting to a potential campaign. So yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but you need to take ownership and be consistent, because if you don't talk about your book and you really don't push it out, nobody else will, because you have to be proud about doing that, not be insufferable, but reach out to all
Right.
the networks that you can and do it in a dignified and a nice way. It's possible.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective, taking ownership of the publicity of your own book and being involved in the process. I think that actually helps because you know your book the best. And that's I think the one of the best ways to actually and I think that comes out in the way you market your books as well. Because if you take the example of KKPL or Excess Baggage, the goodies that accompany the book are very, very specific to the book. So are they actually coming from you or are they coming from Harper as an idea?
Harper, completely. So I
Okay.
have, there's this, my publicist at HarperCollins, Pratik, he Agarwal, he's absolutely fantastic, and he keeps on coming up with these wonderful ideas. So the KKPL box, there was the limited edition box, and I got so many galis I
Yes.
bet where people were writing and saying that, where's the box? I want to buy the box. I even had to write back to Harper saying, can you please come up with a whole bunch of boxes? They were like, no, they're really expensive. We only got a limited amount. We can't do it. So that was a fantastic box. I barely got one and I'm holding on to it tight. As far as I think I have one tag which I want to show you. I think one finally came to me. So this was a baggage tag. So see, when you have to be clear about what you're doing, and it has to be an ROI positive idea. You can't just go around making merchandise and spending a lot of money. So they come up with some very smart plans, and I keep on feeding into it as well as and when I can. So this is the baggage tag that comes with it. So there's Anviksha and Smita Punjabi right there. So it's cute. So this is what was sent along, to the press with all the, so a lot of yellowness, as you can see. So brightening up,
Yes.
bringing the cheer that's required in the moment. So
That's
yeah.
true. That's very true. Talking about the cheer, there something very interesting happened in the last week, I guess. So you were featured. In fact, HT Branch did a piece titled "Trials and Trips of Social Media," and you, along with Anmol and I don't remember the third
Rehana.
person.
Rehana
You
Munir. Yeah.
Rihanna,
Hmm.
Rihanna Munir. So you were there on the cover and you had an interesting take on the topic. So would you like to tell us on your take on social media as a journalist, as a person from advertising, and as an author? Do you have three different perspectives, or is it just a single one?
So I think I have a very, again, most of my perspectives in life seem too, naive and simplistic, but I can only speak from the shoes of an author, because before that, Facebook was this only, avenue of social media I used to even venture into. I would throw sheep at people, poke people, write on people's walls because those features were
Right.
there. And it was a place where I posted a couple of pictures when I came back from my holiday. That was it. That was my, interaction with social media. But when I realized that I was going to be doing this for good and I needed to become an author and build a brand, that is when I understood the necessity of Twitter and Instagram. After years of toiling with it, what I have finally realized is that, these are spaces meant for different kinds of communication. Twitter is more for conversations and, exchange of ideas. And Instagram is essentially a very, visual, audio visual medium, right?
Right.
So you have to change your content accordingly. I might keep on talking. Might have great tips for Twitter and Instagram. Unfortunately, I don't apply them because when it comes to posting, I take one of my posts and I'll just plaster it across because it's very exacting, Sid, because you're constantly. I try to personally reach out and respond to anybody who reaches out to me. So there's constantly open dialogues at one end. Then there are people who are posting about your book. So you have to extend the courtesy of responding, keep on posting.
Right.
So if I actually need to do this with a concerted effort, if I need to do this, I will be doing this the entire day, right? And that's not the
Right.
way it works. And I know how much effort it is to continuously build your blogs and do your Instagramming and this, that, and the other. So I put in a certain concerted amount of time every day, and I keep that aside. But I have just realized that I am online because it is an interesting space. It's a buzzy, informative world where I take the information I need. I reach out to amazing people I would have never reached out to. It becomes a channel of communication with people, God knows, from across the world who are reading my books. And I really, really appreciate that. But that is where I draw the line. It's a space where I will talk about my books and I will possibly let people peep into a little bit into my, my regular life. But beyond that, it can also be a very frenetic and exacting space, which turns very
Right.
acrimonious and it sucks the life out of you. And I don't want it to ever, allow it to do that. So I draw the line because which is why I don't engage too much. I have my sphere of influence. I will say the things I need to, and I will put out the opinions I need to. But like I mentioned in the article as well, that I don't need to be vociferous all the time. I'm the one who decides what I need to say and how much I need to say it and how loud I need to say it. So I always used to feel the pressure earlier of, what the hell to post, and also, oh my God, because a lot of people end up wanting to extract it and invoke a response out of you.
Right.
But I have decided that it is an extension of me. And if I am a moderate and measured person, I will extend that personality into social media as well. And nobody can change that. I am the one who decides. And that is exactly what the quote was in the article as well.
Yeah, I remember that. That's why I put this question at the last minute because this was something that that I wanted to talk about because we are on social media, especially in this lockdown, we went more into social media. So in fact, this was an interesting article as well. Plus, you feature on the cover as well. So how was that
Yeah.
experience?
That was amazing. I mean, I'm reading HT and HT Brunch for years now. And to find yourself plastered on the cover, I mean, seriously, I think I had posted saying I genuinely forgot. So we had the shoot and I was just sitting and having my tea in the morning and I completely forgot about it. And I got a message with the picture. And that's when I sent my husband off because the paper guy hadn't come. Interestingly, he didn't deliver the papers. So
Okay.
I sent my husband out and he was running all over trying to get copies. It was a great smack of pride. And, just to look back, the purists would say that, so what, you appeared on a cover. It's not that, it's not about validation or gratification. It's just that there is an intense joy in looking back 3-4 years, thinking that I started at a point where I didn't realize that this was going to be my purpose. I had found another purpose and I was going to do this for the rest of my life. And then to see yourself on a cover with a community, authors don't make it to covers very often. They don't, so there was a great sense of pride and joy. And I think I'm going to be holding on to that cover for a while.
Right. So that's the questions I have. Thank you, Richa, for joining. Uh, this is Excess Package. I think you'll be seeing it inverted, but do check
What
it out.
self-respecting author won't put up her own book here? This is also inverted again, but here
Definitely.
you go.
I think for Instagram lives, we'll have to get an mirror image copy of
Yeah,
the covers now.
we should.
Get
We
that
should.
plated.
Yes.
So
And
that was
congratulations
Excess
for
Package.
being a blogger of the month. So please congratulate
Thank you. Thank you.
Sid on that, and please do buy books because most authors count peanuts and they sit at home, and it's you guys who have to buy the books to let them write more.
Definitely. And thank you, Richa, for joining in this Instagram live. Apologies for the initial
No
hiccups that
worries.
we had.
We'll do a Havan before the next
It
one.
definitely we and before KKPL 2 and that single titled book comes out.
Absolutely.
And so thank you. That
Thanks,
was
Sid.
Richa Mukherjee, author of Excess Baggage, published by HarperCollins. Check out the book. The review is up on my Instagram and all other my social media accounts. You can check it out. Uh, there are multiple reviews coming in. Most of them have been superb, and the book is flowing off the shelf. And it's a good read. It's an amazing read. You get to read about different stories. You read about Pindi, you read about Matran, and then you go on a solo journey with your
And
mother.
there's a newest
So
called Susan as well, if that interests anyone.
definitely, I forgot about it. Yes. So
Yeah.
thank you, Richa, for joining,
Thank you
and
so much.
best of luck for the books that have come out and the two that you are writing.
Thank you
Hope
so
to see you
much.
again.
Absolutely. Thanks for reading, reviewing. Thanks for this session. And I'm sorry I saw a lot of comments, but thank you for joining in, whoever did.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye.
So that was Richa Mukherjee, author of Excess Baggage. The If you have missed out on the session, it will be up on my YouTube and IGTV. You can check it out. Do check out the book. The review is also up on my Instagram, and you can check it out. Thank you for joining. I'll be soon putting up a post about the next one.